There we go. All right, we will start then in three, two, one. And hello to all of you out there in podcast world. I'm your host, Brandon Davis, and we are the front row. I messed that up.
Front row.
This is the front row movie review.
Nothing
The
but quality
podcast
here
for
on
people
this
who
podcast.
The podcast for people who actually like movies and TV. I'm your host, Brandon Davis. See, I should put the podcast name before my name. That might help. But and this is Zone-i-Sodes. This is our weekly, to put it, trek into the wonderful world of the Twilight Zone, episode by episode. And we are talking about, actually, this is episode
42.
6, episode 42 for us. Eye of the Beholder, which aired November 11th, 1960. And I have here with me my co-host every week.
On this trek, that's not a trek, but I talk about trek too. I'm Scott. Hi.
Hi, and Scott, we have a special guest actually for the first time here, season 2. Why don't you introduce him to us?
Yeah. So okay, when you're in that art class in high school, there's always, when you're doing your stick figures and looking like an idiot, there's always that guy who's like doing stuff that's, advanced for somebody who's been in the business for 40 years. That was Corey. And Corey has been one of those guys. We went to high school together, and I've been following him stalking him on Facebook for years. The dude is very, very good at prosthetic makeup, a lot of different art areas. And so when he reached out to us and said that he wanted to talk with us about Twilight Zone, Eye of the Beholder seemed to be a great place to start with that. As well as now he has told us through obsessing with us for the past few hours on Facebook Messenger that he may be even more obsessed with Twilight Zone than we are. So Corey, take it away.
Hello, everybody. That's me, Corey Ruby. Scott and I go way back, known each other since, has it been high school or was it junior high?
Oh, yeah, it was probably junior high. Wilson Wildcats.
I did not go to Wilson.
Oh, so no, it was not.
Deere, so it was not junior high. I apologize. But no, we were nerds then, and it's only evolved into a real problem as we've gotten older. So
I have many problems. This is just one.
Yeah, same.
Awesome. So,
go ahead, Brandon.
And then, no, I was going to say, Scott, tell us, because you meant, Corey, you're a makeup artist, right?
Yes, sir. Self-taught makeup artist actually was not in the books for me in high school. I had no idea you could even make a profession out of it. I didn't actually start pursuing it until I think 2006, 2007, and started working in the industry about 2011 is when I got my first film gig and have since done numerous projects since then. So, yeah.
Awesome. And where'd your interest in the Twilight Zone begin?
Actually, growing up, I was listening to one of your guys' podcasts earlier today and was listening to you guys reference a lot of the Universal Studios monsters. And I overheard Scott mention, too, the sci-fi marathon. And sci-fi has been doing that for hell as long as I can remember. And I remember actually watching that, marathoning it even then as a kid in junior high or even in grade school. And that just carried on into my adult years. And once Netflix picked it up, I started watching it on Netflix because I didn't have cable. So then I would binge watch it on Netflix. And I try to watch it about 2 or 3 times a year, actually.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we are discussing one of the premiere Twilight Zone episodes today, so I'm excited to get into it. But as always, Scott, let's have your plot summary first for Eye of the Beholder.
Brandon. One of these days, you're going to remember the one question you're supposed to ask a new person on the podcast.
I'm sorry. On Zone-i-Sodes, I forget that we're a part of the front row.
Don't tell Jeremy that. He'll get very upset.
I know. Yes, Corey, what is your favorite movie? I'm doing a bad job of hosting today.
Oh, is this a new thing you guys are doing? What's my favorite movie? How do I narrow it down to something like that?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The Front Row Network. So we ask every first-time guest what their favorite movie is.
That's a tough call. Clearly, I'm a horror movie enthusiast, so I own over 300 horror movies on DVD. If I had to pick, I'm gonna pick a classic, and I'm gonna go with.
Fine by me.
I missed that. What'd you
No,
say?
I said it's fine by me. It's the classic show.
Awesome. I'm gonna go with Psycho. I was a big Alfred Hitchcock fan.
Yes.
I can't get enough of watching Psycho. I own a special edition of Psycho. I thought it was one of those films that never needed sequels. I wish they would have never done sequels, but yeah, that was a big one for me.
Awesome.
Okay, now I can do the synopsis, I think.
Yes, Scott. Thank you.
I like giving Brandon trouble. Okay. Janet Tyler is an ugly woman. The state believes she's an ugly woman. Everyone at the hospital she works at, or she's a patient at, thinks she's an ugly woman. And Janet herself believes that she is an ugly woman, to a point where she has gone through 11 surgeries to correct the disfigurement of her face. And we find Janet with a bandage over her head, hoping that this 11th surgery will be the one to relieve her of her disfigurement. And as we take off the bandages, we find out that Janet is looks normal, and probably a little bit more than normal for most average humans. And the people who have been working to change her are the ones who seem to be disfigured. There's a lot more to it than that, but that's really the plot.
And I will, as always, say what Rod has to say. And I love, we're at the point of the show, of the series, where Rod is doing these creative entrances into his little intros here. And you see his silhouette walking into the scene before you even see him or hear his voice. And I love the way it's shot. But here's what he says. Suspended in time and space for a moment, is Janet Tyler, who lives in a very private world of darkness. Dimensions are the size, thickness, length of the swath of bandages that cover her face. Go back into this room, and also in a moment we will look under those bandages. So we are not to be surprised by what we see, for this isn't just a hospital. 7 is not just a woman. Twilight Zone, and Miss Janet Tyler with you, is about to enter it. Guess first, Corey, what are your first impressions of Eye of the Beholder?
Well, having already been biased and being a fan, my first impressions of Eye of the Beholder, the first time I watched it, I wasn't really sure whose side I was on, more so. With the way that it was depicted on the show. I think it was because of my youth. I didn't understand. I was like, well, okay, is she normal, or are they supposed to be normal? Yeah. But I loved the moodiness of the episode, and I think that one thing that I really enjoy about it is basically that it kind of reverberates through time. It's one of those stories that like a little bit of everybody can relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. Scott?
Yeah, well, this is obviously one of the, if you don't know Twilight Zone, you at least know the twist at the end of this one, because it's played quite a bit, and also it's really in pop culture. With the doctor saying, no change at all. You kind of get the idea of what's going to happen there. So I don't remember ever seeing this when I didn't know what the twist was. But this is one of those episodes where knowing the twist isn't the most important part of the episode. It's how you get there and how everyone reacts to it. And the other thing too is, and I didn't realize that until I watched it this time, is the twist comes with about 10 minutes left to go in the episode. And it's what happens after the twist and her trying to escape from the hospital. That's also really interesting too. So I also think this is probably one of the most interesting and beautiful shot episodes that we've run into. And I know, Brandon, you already kind of hit on that with Rod. But they do a lot of different camera things in here that are really interesting, and I'm sure we'll talk about a lot of that too.
Yeah, not just Dutch angles, more than that.
Now, there are a few of those though, but not many.
Well, yeah. But this is one of the first Twilight Zone episodes I remember watching, and I feel like I knew the twist because just if you're culture, you've seen references to this over and over again. But it's like what Corey was talking about with always envy the people who saw it first, the beginning, without knowing all of the twists in it. Because even if you've never seen the movie now, you know what the twists are. With this episode, I really would have liked to have seen it fresh when it first aired, just not knowing what was coming. But even when you know what was coming, it is a brilliant episode, just in the way that it's shot, in what it's trying to say, in the lighting. And it's an episode where you barely see anybody's face. You just hear voices, and you see shots. You see body shots without. That's one of the brilliant parts of this episode too. I always say that Rod was a genius in casting. Well, in this, he was a genius of voice casting. He has got a distinctive voice in this episode. It's a really special episode, unlike I don't think anything we've seen so far that we've talked about. So let's go back to you, Corey. Though let's talk about some of the things that work for you in this episode. What are some of the highlights that stand out to you?
Well, without, again, sounding biased, clearly the makeup that was done for the episode was one of the first things that stuck out to me because it's really well done. There's a lot of close-up shots of the male actors and the female actors in the makeup. And for something that's, we're talking decades old now, they still look really good and very believable, especially for back then. When you think about some of the other Twilight Zone episodes, some of the makeup was a little bit more on the rough side, whereas these were very well done. But yeah, that's probably the thing that stands out to me the most as far as like what I like a lot about the episode. I like that it's very darkly lit. So there's all the scenes where they're in her room and they're tending to her. It's very kind of spotlight on the bed. And the rest of the room is dark. I like moody elements like that in a lot of the Twilight Zone episodes, or just in classic cinema in general.
Scott?
To go on the makeup side again a little bit, I go back again to my Twilight Zone companion book that I was just reading through as well, and I'm still waiting for your email back, Mark. I've probably sold a few books for you already. Just email me back. They're actually, because of budgetary concerns, they only could do 4 full masks, and they weren't even really masks. They were the forehead, and they were the nose and lip, and what they did was they produced several of each one and moved them around to the different actors. So it looked like the actors all had different facial features, but really you're only looking at 4 different prosthetics for all of them reused quite a bit. So I think a lot of that is hidden through the makeup put onto them as well as through the camera angles too. So they did a lot with the minimal budget that they had on this. Other things I like about this episode is the doctors and the nurses. For the most part, they come off very sympathetic. And I think that's one of the reasons why, if you don't know the twist is coming, you may think that Janet's a burn victim or has some kind of odd genetic defect or whatever, because these actors are doing whatever they can to come off as sympathetic professionals who are just trying to help this woman out. And I think the scene with the nurse and the doctor show that off well, because the nurse is telling the doctor, you get too involved with your patients, you care too much, and it's going to be too stressful for you. And he argues back that how can he not care about these people who have these disfigurements? So I like that quite a bit. And another piece that I think is just amazing is how they choreographed, and it literally is choreographed. Going back to the research, they had to choreograph every single movement and every single camera movement and every single placement of the camera to make sure that you never saw their faces.
Uh-huh.
And that's every time, like the one shot where they're looking down on her and the doctor and the nurses as they're trying to force her back in the bed. That shot and that angle is perfect to where you get the silhouettes of them, but you never notice what they look like. It's just all of that choreography that probably went into this, that is just insane amount of work for a 20-minute episode. That's why it's brilliant.
Yeah. Actually, I kind of wanted to touch base on that too, Scott. That was one of the things I remembered the most about it the first time I watched it was after you've seen it once, then you finally realize, okay, well, this is the way that these individuals look. I went back and watched the episode again and tried to catch in the silhouettes to see if maybe there was a mistake or something in there, to see if, because the whole episode, the original time or the first time I watched it, you're thinking that they're people, and like you mentioned, you're thinking that she's a victim of some sort of disfigurement herself. So going back and trying to even catch that, the choreography, like you mentioned, was a very big part of the episode, even for me as well.
This whole episode here just grabs you, and like I mentioned before, I'm very big on voices, and I love good voices, and each character in this episode has a wonderful distinctive voice. And I was reading some of the notes earlier from some of the trivia to the episode, and I love the fact that Stewart's voice is Janet Tyler the whole time. She's got a very distinctive sort of smoky voice. And when the bandages come off, it's Donna Douglas. Surprise, it's Ellie Mae. And interesting is that I heard that she had listened to Maxine Stewart's voice all week. She was able to match it in the couple of lines she had when her bandages were off. And so that's impressive that they didn't have to even dub her voice with Maxine Stewart's. But yeah, I like how there's really no villain in this. We don't really get a good what this world they're living is and who this sort of leader is that they talk about, that we see and hear a little bit. He might be the only villain, but really in terms of the piece and in terms of the characters we get to know, and it's all in perception. And of course that's what this whole episode's about. But in this episode that doesn't work for you,
You kind of broke out there, Brandon. Which person you said?
Is there anything in this episode that doesn't work for you, Corey?
There you go.
Yeah. Actually, one of my biggest critiques was the voice work, because it was interesting that you pointed it out as being a positive for you. When I watched it again the other night, honestly, I don't have all the behind the scenes like information and whatnot, but that was always my biggest complaint, is that when she was in the bandages, you had almost kind of throwing back to discussing Psycho a little bit ago with you guys, you almost had the same voice of like Norman Bates's mother, kind of like that raspy, gritty voice. And then when the bandages came off and she's this young woman, that was the only thing that ever really got to me. As I was like, okay, well, that's clearly two different voices, and I never understood why they did that, unless it was just supposed to be like muffled because of the bandage, maybe.
Oh, if you don't like ADR, wait until you get to Bewitching Pool. Brandon hasn't watched Bewitching Pool. I'm sure you have, Corey. But when you talk about ADR,
yeah,
ooh, moose and squirrel.
All right, what doesn't work for you, Scott?
There are a couple different themes in here. Obviously, the one is, what is real beauty and who decides what beauty is. But the other piece, and Brandon, you already hit on it, is conformity. And conformity to a point where it's almost a fascist ideal of conformity. And if you do not believe what the state believes, you must be ostracized, or in extreme cases, and they mentioned this, you may just be put out of your misery. That's fine, but I think the leader, especially when he is on every screen in the hospital and the screen comes down right in front of her, was overkill. If I have any critique of this episode, it's you don't need to beat me over the head with it. I know what you're going for here. Your use of the term "the state" is fine. I get that. You don't need to show me Hitler with a upturned lip. It's a little bit too much.
Yeah, that's my biggest critique of the episode. Sort of the chase sequence. That we don't need to get all these visuals, as you mentioned, and the whole thing of the state isn't as well defined as I'd like it to be. I mean, it doesn't need to be, but that's really my only major of the episode. I think everything else seems to fall into place pretty well. Let's as we kind of get toward wrapping up here, though. Corey, what do you have any other final thoughts about the episode?
I think for the series of the Twilight Zone, it was definitely one of those staple episodes that if you've never seen it and never watched the series, for one, I don't know why you wouldn't have, but if you haven't, that is a very good one to start with. With the way everything plays out in that episode, there's a lot of relatable characteristics for people in their average everyday social life. It's very relatable to a lot of people, especially if you've ever been kind of outcast or ostracized for the way you look or the way you appear. Or even if you just have your views on politics and government and whatnot, and just the way that it all is, I think that, yeah, it's just one of those episodes I think people need to see. But that's kind of like, I don't really have much else to offer to it other than like that I think that the girl was very overdramatic in a couple of her scenes, because she goes from like this nice, almost poetic, like wanting to know what it's like outside and wanting to see the sky and feel the air on her, and then instantly just like dives into like almost a madness, like at the drop of a hat. So
yeah, I saw that too, and the one thing I did notice as well is she's supposed to be scared of the handsome guy because he's not handsome in their world, but she also is a little scared, at least a couple times, of the other ones under the makeup. So I think if she would have done a better job of thinking that she was the ugly one, and then being scared of the guy who comes to pick her up, I think it would have come off a little bit better. So I agree with that on that. I also think though too. I mean, we don't know how long she's been under those bandages. I mean, it's been quite a while, I'm guessing, and you get a little stir crazy too. So I give her a little bit, but I agree there should have been a little bit more of a dichotomy there between how she reacts to the doctors, to how she reacts to herself and to other people with her disfigurement.
It's the monster movie effect.
Yeah, because she mentions in some of her dialogue in the episode about how when she was younger, other kids laughing at her and, you know, poking fun at her disfigurement. So it always kind of, I never really understood that, like, why when the bandages came off, she looked like she was more afraid of them than just trying to escape to be free. Yeah. Like, I never really understood that.
And I think that was maybe a choice of the actress, where if she would have played that a little differently, it would have come off a little stronger.
Yeah.
Yeah. That that's really all I have to add. I'm trying to think if there's any other things that stood out to me watching it this time, but I really, as I said before, I would like to know a little more about how this state is set up a little bit, where they send you off to live in a ghetto colony if you're attractive, in our opinion. But
Rod disagrees with you, sir. As we get to the closing narration, because I was thinking the same thing, because they call themselves humans, and so you're thinking, okay, maybe this is in the future, maybe there's a mutation, and the mutation becomes the majority, and all of that good stuff. And then Rod's like, it doesn't matter. You shouldn't even think about that. I'm like, oh, thanks, Rod. Appreciate it. I'm sorry.
I always took it as an alternate reality.
Yeah. Okay.
Because that he kind of does that in a lot of. I mean, when you think of the Twilight Zone as a whole, it's sort of kind of like, you know, not to name drop something else, but it's sort of like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Or even in the comics, there's so many different universes. Like, this storyline doesn't make sense with this storyline, and it's because there's different takes and different perspectives. So that's one thing that I got about that episode, is I always took it as an alternate reality to our own.
Yeah, absolutely. As we get now toward the end of the episode, we're gonna invite Corey in to do what Scott and I like to do at the end of each episode, which is rank this on our scale of 1 to 10. And if you're just joining us, these episodes, 10 being the absolute best the Twilight Zone has to offer, 5 being an average Twilight Zone episode, which means it's probably one of the best of any other TV show, and 1 being absolutely the worst, The Chaser and Bewitching Pool, although I can't speak to it yet because I haven't watched it.
And you're not going to watch it until 2020. We're saving that for last. You're going to be a Bewitching Pool virgin before we get there.
All right. Well, Scott, we'll start with you actually here. Where would you put Eye of the Beholder on your rank?
I've been thinking about this one for a while, because obviously it's one of the best episodes of the Twilight Zone, and I've been trying to figure out, am I going to give this one a 10? Am I going to give this one a 10 when I've only given out 110 up until this point? And that was The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. And at first I was like, no, I'm going to give it a 9. Because, again, I just don't like the Hitler thing. I think it's overused. It's used better in other Twilight Zone episodes when we get to it. But I think the message the message overcomes the kind of heavy-handedness of some of the theme in this. And that message resonates a lot more now, even than I think it did in the 50s. In the 50s, or the 60s, when they were just coming out of the Red Scare, or still in the Red Scare. And now, with everything going on, and I won't get into politics as much as I did with Monsters, but I think there's a lot of risk of people trying to conform, and people trying to say, if you are not like us in one way or another, you are against us. And when you are against us, that turns to violence very quickly. And so it's something that I think needs to be talked about more and dealt with more, and I think this does a really fine job of doing that. So it is going to be my second 10.
All right. Corey, where would you rank it?
I guess I would probably rank it a 10 as well. Reason being, it's just one of those staple episodes. When I think of the Twilight Zone and I think of all the episodes that I've seen, the monsters are due on Maple Street, Eye of the Beholder, To Serve Man, like there's so many episodes that are good, but there's definitely critical episodes that I think if you want to get into the series or it's your first time watching it, those are episodes you need to see that drove the series on for future seasons, and I think that this is one of those.
And we all know I'm an easier grader than Scott, so if he gives it a 10, I'm going to give it a 10.
I don't know. You could have given it a 9 just to be different.
Wouldn't that have been shocking?
I would have dropped something right here.
but no, this is a 10 for me because it's got its flaws, but the visuals, the way it's shot, and the pros definitely outweigh the small cons in this episode, and it's definitely a 10. I think this is what, my fourth 10.
Yeah, you gave 10s to Walking Distance, The Hitchhiker,
Tens?
Monsters Who Do on Maple Street, and now Eye of the Beholder.
Maple Street. So 42 episodes, and I've only given out 4 10s. That's not bad.
I think you're doing fine. I'm just a harder grader.
All right. Well, as we wrap up here, and before we do our closings and our plugs and everything, I'll finish with what Rod has to say at the end of this episode. Questions that come to mind: where is this place, and when is it? What kind of world where ugliness is the norm and beauty the deviation from the norm? The answer is it doesn't make any difference, because the old saying happens to be true. Eye of the beholder, in this year or 100 years hence, on this planet or wherever there is a human life, perhaps out amongst the stars, the beholder. Lesson to be learned in the Twilight Zone. Tell them where they can find us and all of that stuff, and then we'll let Corey do some plugging for some of his stuff.
Good. So for us, you can find us at thefrontrowmoviereviews.com. You can email us at thefrontrowmoviereviews@gmail.com. You can find us on any of your social media whereabouts by searching the Front Row Movie Reviews. And if you're listening to the podcast version of this, please be sure to subscribe and give us a review on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you're listening to us on. And if you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to hit subscribe. And this was another live episode, so if you hit that little notify bell at the below your subscribe button, you'll get notified when we go live on all of these, so you can join in the discussion as well, too. And then next week, Brandon, we have the man, the myth, the legend, the Shat is joining the Twilight Zone for the first of 2 times. And I will continue to say, and I'm gonna throw it out a little bit right now, and kind of give away how I feel about this next episode. This episode is the better of the 2 Shatner episodes, and I know I'm in the minority on that. Corey is showing off a picture from it on his T-shirt. I think Corey would agree with me. And I won't say the gentleman's name because I haven't fully confirmed him yet. I'm working with him out in LA right now. I'm hoping to have a certain somebody who's a friend of the Front Row join us, who has actually directed the Shatner, to join us next week. So as soon as I can confirm him, we'll post it up on social media too.
Pretty cool.
Awesome. Corey, where can we find your work and some of the stuff you've done?
Okay. Easiest place, obviously, I'm on Facebook. One of my biggest pet peeves is don't misspell my name. It's Corey. A lot of people spell it Cory or Corie. That is not how I spell my name. Corey Ruby, Ruby. For my Facebook, I have a business page on there, which is Gory Corey Effects. It's also misspelled on purpose now because of my name. It's GoreyCorey, the letter F and the letter X. My Instagram is Mr. Gory Corey. and I have a shop on Etsy as well. Gory Corey Effects on there.
And tell us about Saturday, because we do have some Quad City folks listening.
Saturday? You mean Sunday?
Sunday. I'm sorry, Sunday.
Sunday.
Close. Sunday.
Yeah, I am throwing a live casting demonstration at a new venue downtown Davenport. I just kind of want to show more people the other side of makeup and show them the more technical side of it, and it gives people too the opportunity to learn how to, if you want to cast. You see people doing that on Facebook right now where they're casting their family's hands. They're all holding hands, and someone pours like silicone or alginate over top their hands, and then they put stone in there, and they have this nice keepsake. But in makeup and prosthetic effects, that's what we use to break down prosthetics, to do sculptures and stuff like that. So you have to make individual parts of people's faces. So it plays a critical role. And there's a lot of people around here right now, and a lot of people trying to come up in the industry who want to learn prosthetic makeup. And this definitely takes you from, and I quote, the Susie Homemaker makeup artist into more of the advanced learning.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, Corey, we really appreciate you being on this week. It's always good to have a guest, so it's just not the two of us yapping the whole time.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me here. As soon as I heard about it, I can't tell you, man, my ears perked up. I got super excited and wanted to join in almost instantly. So I'm glad you guys had me on. I appreciate it.
And this won't be the last time, my friend. We'll get you on again.
Awesome. I'll look forward to that. Thank you.
And it's good to see you. Now, let's not do it 10 years in between again.
No.
Or actually, it's probably been like 14 years, to be honest. It's been a while. We're getting old.
We just hit our, what was it? We missed our 10-year. No, did you go to the 10-year?
Dude, we just missed our 15.
Then I went to the 15. You weren't there.
I went to the 10. It was at a casino, and I just played in the slots for a while.
Yeah.
It was really exciting.
Reliving the other Twilight Zone episodes.
Yes.
Yeah, no, the 15 wasn't all that it was cracked up to be either. So
yeah, sounds like our class in a nutshell. Well, thanks for coming on, Corey. We'll definitely have you back on.
Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
And as we wrap up this episode of Zone-i-Sodes and we look forward to the chat next week, I am Brandon Davis.
I'm Scott McFarlane.
And I'm Corey Ruby.
And yes.
Sorry.
See you. And we will see you on the couch.
The chat is coming.